Level 1, the arrival. You sit on a dark bus smelling of cold diesel exhaust and the nervous sweat of 40 complete strangers. It is 3 in the morning. You stare out the scratched glass window at the empty highway, wondering if you made a terrible mistake. The recruiter promised you adventure and purpose. Right now, you just feel a cold knot forming heavily in the pit of your stomach. The air brakes hiss loudly. The bus lurches to a sudden halt outside a brightly lit brick building surrounded by tall wire fences. A heavy silence falls over the rows of seats. Nobody speaks. Nobody moves. You can hear your own heart beating in your ears. The metal doors swing open violently. A man wearing a wide round hat steps onto the bus and unleashes a deafening, terrifying roar. He demands you stand up. He demands you move faster than you have ever moved. You scramble into the narrow aisle in sheer panic. You stumble down the steps into the biting night air. Yellow floodlights blind you as you are herded onto painted yellow footprints. You stand at attention alongside boys who look just as terrified as you. You keep your eyes locked straight ahead on the brick wall. The screaming does not stop. It comes from all directions. Men in perfectly pressed uniforms circle you like predators, searching for weakness. You are marched inside a sterile white hallway. You are told to empty your pockets and strip away every piece of your civilian life. Your phone is placed into a brown paper bag. Your clothes are folded away. You surrender the last connections you had to the outside world. You are handed a plastic bag filled with cheap basic supplies, a razor, soap, socks, and a heavy canteen that clinks against your leg. You move to the barber chair. In less than 30 seconds, clippers strip away your hair. They strip away your personal identity with it. You look in the mirror and do not recognize the pale face staring back. You look exactly like the 50 other shaved heads around you. A doctor in a white coat examined you. You are cattle being processed through an efficient machine. Your body no longer belongs to you. You sign papers you barely have time to read. You pledge your life to a massive bureaucracy that views you as a simple number. The fluorescent lights hum loudly above your head. You have been awake for 20 hours, but sleep is nowhere in your immediate future. You are issued stiff camouflage uniforms that smell faintly of chemicals. You pull the heavy fabric over your exhausted limbs and lace up stiff boots. You stand in a chaotic formation holding heavy bags. The screaming instructors demand perfection from a group of terrified kids who know absolutely nothing. You realize this is not a game. There is no pause button. You cannot simply walk away and call a taxi to take you home. You are trapped in a system designed to break you down completely. You feel small, helpless, and deeply unsure of your own survival. The sun begins to rise over the flat concrete horizon. You have survived the first night, but the longest months of your life await. You pick up your heavy duffel bag and march toward the barracks. You are officially property of the government now. You are ready to break. Level 2, the shock. You wake up violently to the sound of metal trash cans being slammed against the hard tile floor. It is completely dark outside. You have only slept for 2 hours. Your body aches from sleeping on a mattress thinner than a blanket. Voices scream at you to get your feet on the floor. You scramble out of the bunk, fighting the tangled mess of stiff olive sheets. You have exactly 40 seconds to dress, tie your boots, and stand rigidly at the foot of your bed. You fail miserably. The entire platoon is punished for your failure. You are ordered to push the floor until your triceps burn and your shoulders threaten to give out. This is the new reality. There are no individuals here. When one person makes a minor mistake, everybody pays a heavy physical price. The concept of fairness is completely erased from your mind. You will suffer for the sins of men you do not even know yet. You rush to the latrine with 50 other men. You have 3 minutes to shave, brush your teeth, and use the toilet in plain sight. Privacy is a luxury you left behind on the civilian bus. You learn to perform intimate bodily functions while someone yells at the back of your head. The mirror above the sink is scratched and foggy. You catch a glimpse of your terrified eyes before being violently shoved aside by another recruit. You run everywhere. Walking is strictly forbidden. You sprint to the dining facility, standing in a tight line with your heels slammed together. You eat your breakfast in complete silence. Your eyes must remain fixed on the table. You chew your food mechanically without tasting a single bite. You have less than 5 minutes to consume thousands of calories. You shovel dry eggs and burnt toast down your throat to fuel the machine. The instructors pace the aisles like hungry wolves. They look for anyone chewing too slowly or making unauthorized eye contact. You keep your head down. You march back to the barracks in a disorganized mob. You are not a unit yet. You are just a chaotic collection of frightened civilians. The physical exhaustion begins to settle deep into your bones. Your calves cramp, your feet develop painful blisters that pop inside your stiff leather boots. You are constantly thirsty. You drink water until you feel sick, but the sweat pours out of you faster than you can replace it. The instructors want to see who will quit early. They push you past your physical limits to test the fragility of your breaking point. You stand in formation under the burning afternoon sun. Your legs tremble, you focus on breathing, desperate to survive until the sun finally goes down. Level 3, the mold. The chaos of the first few days gives way to an agonizing obsession with perfect geometry and endless repetition. You spend 4 hours learning how to roll a pair of green wool socks into a perfectly tight cylinder. It feels completely absurd. The instructors rip your locker apart because one shirt is folded half an inch off the required regulation. You learn a hard lesson quickly. Details matter. A loose thread on your uniform is treated like a fatal mistake. You start seeing the world through a lens of microscopic flaws. You strip your bed and make it again 20 times in a single morning. The blanket must bounce a coin. The corners must be 45 degrees. It is not about the bed. You realize they are reprogramming your brain. They are teaching you to follow complex instructions under intense emotional pressure. If you can be trusted to fold a shirt perfectly under stress, you might be trusted to load a weapon perfectly in the dark. You march on the concrete parade deck for countless hours. You learn to step with the exact same rhythm as the man beside you. Left, right, left. The cadence echoes in your mind even when you try to sleep. Your body moves automatically to the barked commands. The harsh sun beats down on the back of your unprotected neck. The sweat stings your eyes, but you are not allowed to wipe it away. Your heels blister and bleed. You put white tape over the wounds and lace your boots tighter. Complaining is an excellent way to attract negative attention. You take classes on military history and rank structure. You struggle to stay awake in the warm classroom while your exhausted body demands deep sleep. You learn to fear the loud voice of authority. You memorize the chain of command from your squad leader up to the highest generals. The fear of making a mistake begins to govern your every waking moment. You double-check your pockets constantly to ensure your locker key is secured. You polish your boots until they look like black glass. You scrub the barracks floor with tiny toothbrushes until your knuckles bleed onto the tile. Nothing is ever clean enough. Nothing is ever fast enough. You are chasing a standard of perfection that the instructors ensure you can never reach. You feel angry at the impossible standards. Then you feel numb. Finally, you simply accept the work and scrub the floor without thinking about why. You are shedding your civilian habits. You stand up straighter. You speak louder. The mold is slowly hardening around your new military identity. Level 4, the weapon. You are marched to a heavy steel armory door. You are about to receive the most important object in your world. The armorer hands you a black rifle. It is heavy, cold, and smells heavily of gun oil and metallic friction. You grip it tightly. You memorize the serial number instantly. This piece of metal is now more important than your own life. You will never leave it unattended. You sleep with the rifle inside your sleeping bag. You carry it to the latrine. You hold it while you eat your terrible food. Dropping the weapon is a severe offense. You watch a recruit drop his rifle and the instructors descend on him like a natural disaster. The psychological pressure mounts rapidly. The instructors remind you constantly that this tool has only one specific purpose, and you must respect its deadly potential. You learn to strip the weapon blindly. You take it apart into dozens of small black pieces and reassemble it until your fingers ache. You learn the exact mechanics of lethality. You memorize the maximum effective range. You study the gas system and the rotating bolt mechanism. You clean the rifle constantly. You use cotton swabs to remove invisible carbon from tiny metallic crevices. The armorer rejects it every single time. You clean it again. You realize the weapon represents your responsibility to the people around you. A dirty weapon will jam when you need it. You march to the firing range. The sound of distant gunfire makes your heart race. You are given live ammunition for the very first time. You lie in the dirt and stare through the metal sights. The target looks incredibly small and distant. Your breathing feels ragged and unsteady. You squeeze the trigger. The rifle kicks violently into your shoulder. The loud crack rings in your ears, despite the foam plugs blocking the sound. You smell burning powder. You adjust your breathing. You learn to slow your heart rate and hold your breath in the exact moment before firing. The smell of sulfur becomes permanently ingrained in your mind. It is a harsh chemical scent that you will associate with power and absolute danger. You shoot until your shoulder is bruised purple. You learn to respect the quiet, terrible power of the heavy tool you carry everywhere. You are no longer just a frightened civilian in a uniform. You are an armed component of a much larger and more dangerous machine. Level 5, the pack. The isolation of the first few weeks fades away. You begin to look closely at the men suffering right beside you. You realize you cannot survive this environment alone. You need the guy next to you to tie his boots fast so you do not get punished. You start helping the slower recruits. When someone falls behind on a heavy run, you grab his webbing and physically pull him up the hill. The instructors notice this shift. They stop punishing individuals and start testing the structural integrity of your entire platoon as a cohesive living unit. You are given impossible physical tasks. You must carry a heavy wooden log across a muddy field without letting it touch the wet ground. Your muscles scream under the crushing weight. You look at the grimacing faces of your peers. You all push upward together in silent agreement. You share your meager food. You share your cleaning supplies. You share whispered complaints in the dark after the overhead lights finally snap off. You learn everything about these strangers. You know who grew up poor, who joined to escape trouble, and who cries quietly when nobody is looking. The superficial differences between you completely vanish. It does not matter where someone came from. It only matters if they can carry their own heavy weight. You form a fierce, protective tribal bond. If someone outside your platoon insults one of your men, you feel a sudden surge of defensive anger. You start calling them your brothers. It feels dramatic to outsiders, but it is the only word that accurately describes this deeply forged connection. You learn the bitter taste of betrayal. One recruit steals food from the dining hall and hides it in his locker. Everyone gets severely punished. The platoon handles the thief internally. A quiet, harsh conversation happens in the showers. The thief never breaks a single rule ever again. You understand the brutal math of teamwork. A weak link gets people killed. You police your own ranks because your survival depends entirely on them. The weak are either pulled up by the strong or they are forced out completely. There is absolutely no middle ground in this unforgiving environment. You move as a single organism. You breathe together, march together, and suffer together. You are finally becoming a capable and dangerous military unit. Level 6, the wall. The physical demands suddenly escalate to a brutal new extreme. You are wearing full combat gear loaded with heavy protective plates. You carry a packed rucksack that weighs 60 pounds. The straps dig deeply into your shoulders, cutting off the circulation to your throbbing arms. You are ordered to march 12 miles through thick woods and unforgiving terrain. It is raining. The thick mud pulls heavily at your soaking boots. After 3 miles, your feet burn with intense friction. Blisters rupture inside your wet socks. Every single step sends a sharp spike of pure agony upward. After 6 miles, your lower back tightens into a rigid knot. You stare blankly at the dark green pack of the man walking directly in front of you. After 9 miles, you hit the wall. Your body completely empties its reserve fuel. Your brain aggressively begs you to simply sit down in the mud. You imagine dropping the heavy pack. You imagine the overwhelming relief of quitting. It becomes a seductive, dangerous fantasy playing loudly in your exhausted mind. You look around. Everyone else is suffering just as badly. Their faces are pale masks of pain. Some are limping heavily, but nobody stops walking. You realize that pain is merely a biological signal, and you can simply choose to ignore it. You detach your conscious mind from the suffering of your body. You keep putting one heavy boot in front of the other. You enter a dark, quiet mental space where only the next physical step truly matters. The instructors yell harsh insults to test your breaking spirit. You do not even hear them anymore. You are deafened by the loud pounding of your own heart. The world shrinks down to the 10 feet of dirt directly in front of you. Nothing else exists. There is only the painful rhythm of the endless march. The finish line eventually appears through the trees. You cross it and collapse onto the wet grass, gasping for air as the heavy pack falls away. You stare up at the gray sky. The rain washes the sweat from your face. A profound sense of invincibility quietly begins to wash over you. You survive the brutal march. You discover a hidden reservoir of dark energy inside yourself. You realize your previous limits were entirely fabricated by your mind. You will never view physical exhaustion the same way again. You know exactly what happens when you hit the wall, and you know how to break it. Level 7, the Crucible. Training culminates in a massive, multi-day field exercise designed to simulate the unforgiving chaos and deep terror of actual brutal warfare. You are deployed to a harsh, remote training area. You sleep in a shallow dirt hole under the freezing stars. You barely sleep at all. The instructors attack your camp with loud artillery simulators and blank machine gun fire. You wake up instantly in the dark, your heart hammering violently in your chest. You scramble blindly out of your tight fighting hole. You organize a rapid defensive perimeter while your squad leader shouts chaotic orders over the deafening simulated explosions. Sleep deprivation reaches a highly dangerous peak. You have been awake for over 50 hours. You start seeing dark, shadowy figures moving nervously in the distant tree line. Your brain actively struggles to process simple commands. You forget your own radio call sign. You stare blankly at your weapon, briefly forgetting how it mechanically operates. You are forced to assault a fortified position up a steep, muddy hill. You bound forward rapidly, dropping to your sore knees, providing cover fire for your brothers. You are incredibly filthy. You smell powerfully of stale sweat, wet dirt, and burnt gunpowder. You eat cold packaged meals in total darkness without tasting a single bite. The physical misery is absolutely overwhelming, but your platoon operates with a terrifying new efficiency. You move quickly, like a coordinated pack of hunting wolves through the dense woods. You communicate without speaking a single word. A simple hand signal shifts the entire formation into a defensive wedge. You have absorbed the brutal lessons. On the final agonizing morning, the simulated war simply stops. A heavy, unnatural silence falls over the foggy woods. The instructors finally order you to stand down entirely. You hike back slowly to the main forward base. Your body is wrecked, bruised, and deeply exhausted, but your chest swells with a strange, quiet, unfamiliar sense of pride. You look at the dirt-caked faces of the men walking beside you. They look like complete monsters. They look exactly like the lethal soldiers they were trained to be. You passed the ultimate psychological test. You proved you can function clearly under the extreme pressure of combat stress. You proved you will never abandon your dedicated team. The Crucible has burned away the final pathetic remnants of your former civilian self. Only the hardened military asset remains standing in the smoking ashes of your past life. Level 8, the Transformation. You stand rigidly on a massive parade deck in a perfectly tailored dress uniform. The brass buttons shine brilliantly in the bright afternoon sun. The military band plays a loud, triumphant marching tune. Thousands of proud families sit nervously in the bleachers, holding digital cameras and waving small, colorful flags with excited smiles. You are finally graduating. You have successfully survived the grueling selection process. You are officially granted the deeply respected title you suffered so intensely to earn. But commanding officer pins a shiny metallic insignia directly onto your chest. You shake his hand firmly. He looks you directly in the eye as an absolute equal. The formal ceremony ends abruptly. You find your nervous family in the massive, joyful crowd. Your mother cries when she hugs you. Your father shakes your hand respectfully. They tell you how much you have changed. They say you look older, harder, and sharper. They are proud, but they seem slightly intimidated by your intense presence. You try to smile naturally and make normal civilian conversation. It feels completely unnatural. Your posture is far too rigid. Your voice sounds significantly too loud and sharp. You notice everything around you. You unconsciously scan the crowded area for exits. You evaluate the posture of the soft civilians wandering aimlessly around the pristine military base. You quickly realize you no longer belong to their incredibly comfortable world. The people who truly understand your deep psychological state are the hard men standing right beside you. You go out to a nice restaurant with your family. You eat quickly and silently, keeping your eyes completely fixed on the empty space ahead. Your friends text you from back home, talking excitedly about trivial local drama and upcoming weekend parties. You read the glowing messages and feel absolutely zero true emotional connection. The training did exactly what it was carefully designed to do. It brutally killed the soft civilian you used to be. It built a functional weapon in his place. You look in the bathroom mirror at the restaurant. You do not recognize the cold, calculating eyes staring back. You are a complete stranger to your own reflection. You pack your heavy bags to leave the training depot. You are incredibly incredibly proud, but you carry a quiet sadness for the innocent version of yourself you forever lost. You board another crowded bus. This time, there is absolutely no fear. There is only a quiet, stoic readiness for the unpredictable chapters that heavily await your arrival. Level 9, the pipeline. You arrive at your advanced technical training school. You confidently expect to be treated like a hardened warrior after surviving the brutal initial crucible. You are completely wrong. You quickly realize you are still at the very bottom of a massive, indifferent machine. The respect you desperately earned was entirely temporary. The violently screaming instructors are gone. They are replaced by bored, deeply cynical instructors who strictly teach you the technical details of your specific new military occupation. You learn how to fix complex mechanical engines, operate heavy encrypted radios, or manage massive logistical spreadsheets. The intense adrenaline of basic training abruptly fades into dull bureaucratic routine. You sit in aggressively air-conditioned classrooms for 8 hours a single day. You read thick technical manuals written in incredibly dense and highly confusing government jargon. You discover the hidden reality of military life. It is not all jumping out of helicopters and shooting weapons. It is mostly waiting around for simple orders. You learn the military phrase, hurry up and wait. You rush to be somewhere at 6 in the morning, only to sit silently on the floor until noon. You start to see cracks in the pristine military image. You see broken equipment, outdated technology, and leaders who care more about administrative paperwork than actual combat training. You are granted limited freedom. You can leave the base on weekends. You go to a terrible dive bar near the gate with your new classmates. You drink terribly cheap beer and carefully listen to older, cynical soldiers tell wildly exaggerated stories about overseas deployments. You desperately want to genuinely experience the real dangerous thing. You make stupid mistakes with your new money. You buy an expensive car at a terrible interest rate from a predatory dealership right outside the base gate. You get in trouble for returning to the barracks late. You learn that military punishment outside of basic training involves brutal administrative paperwork and lost wages. You learn how to navigate the complex social hierarchy. You figure out which sergeants to avoid completely and which ones will actually teach you how to survive. You become incredibly competent at your specific technical daily job. You quickly learn the highly secret operational shortcuts that are absolutely never printed in the official government training manuals. The motivation to be a perfect soldier slowly vanishes. It is replaced by a cynical desire to simply do your job and avoid unnecessary attention. You realize that competence is rewarded with more work. If you fix the radios too quickly, you will be handed another massive pile of broken radios to fix immediately. You learn to moderate your highly noticeable effort. You blend perfectly into the massive gray background of the deeply bureaucratic military machine. You become functionally invisible to higher command. You formally graduate from the technical school without any grand public ceremony. You are simply handed a cheap piece of paper and aggressively told to pack your heavy bags immediately. You receive your final military orders. You are being sent to an active combat unit halfway across the world. The pipeline has finally spit you out. You board a massive commercial airplane filled with other soldiers. You stare silently out the small window as the plane lifts heavily into the dark night sky. Level 10, the asset. You carry your heavy duffel bag into the hallway of your permanent duty station. You are the newest guy in the unit. The older, hardened soldiers look carefully at you with highly visible contempt. They clearly see a completely untested liability. They absolutely do not care about your impressive training scores. You have to prove yourself all over again. You sweep the motor pool. You take out the trash. You do the worst jobs without ever complaining once. You quickly realize the real operational military simply does not function remotely like the pristine training environment. Strict rules are actively bent constantly to successfully meet impossible daily demands. Efficiency takes priority over textbook protocol. You watch a tired combat veteran fix a jammed weapon by kicking it heavily with his dusty boot. The textbook says to carefully disassemble it. He just makes it work. That is the part nobody ever clearly explains to you. The strict training was actively meant to give you a solid foundation. The truly real education only genuinely begins when you finally realize the massive foundation is deeply flawed. You are deployed to a harsh environment. You finally experience the heavy, suffocating weight of a fully loaded rifle in a truly hostile zone. The profound daily boredom of military life is suddenly shattered by terrifying moments of absolute chaos. You finally experience the raw adrenaline you spent months preparing to feel. You realize that combat is entirely different than the carefully planned simulations. You do your job. You do not think about patriotism or glory. You only think about keeping the specific men to your left and right, completely alive. You pull the trigger, you see the immediate consequences of your trained actions, you suppress the shock, and keep firing your weapon. The military money directly deposits itself entirely into your distant bank account while you heavily sleep on a highly uncomfortable small cot inside a dirty, extremely dusty temporary tent. You cannot spend the money in the desert. It slowly piles up meaninglessly while you simply try to survive another dangerously unpredictable day. You stop talking to your civilian friends. They ask you what it is like over there. You realize there are simply no words to describe it accurately. You lose pieces of your humanity. You learn to suppress your emotions completely because panic is a contagious disease that gets people killed. The intense deployment finally completely ends. You eagerly come back home from the highly dangerous overseas deployment. You are absolutely no longer the terrified, inexperienced new guy. You walk quietly through the massive brick company hallway with the quiet, deeply unspoken, absolute confidence of a thoroughly tested, highly capable combat veteran. You see a brand new recruit walking through the double doors. He is carrying a heavy green duffel bag. He looks completely lost and deeply terrified. He nervously reminds you exactly of the fragile, highly terrified innocent boy you completely used to actively be just a few incredibly short, completely transformative years ago. You look at his clean boots and his nervously darting eyes. You do not feel any pity for him whatsoever. You deeply know the massive, brutal military machine is absolutely about to completely break his fragile, innocent spirit and violently rebuild him entirely from the deeply shattered, broken pieces. You step up to him. You bark in order to drop his bag and stand at attention. The vicious cycle starts all over again. You have become a vital component inside a massive, uncaring system. You are a highly specialized asset managed by people who will never know your actual name. Your body constantly aches from the heavy gear. Your knees pop when you stand. Your hearing rings quietly from thousands of loud rifle shots. You gave your youth to the government. They took your fragile civilian identity and forged it into a reliable, efficient tool of national violence. You sit in your sparse room and stare at the wall. You are powerful, capable, and deeply isolated from the normal world you left behind forever. The respected military title gives you a deep, highly profound sense of massive tribal belonging. It absolutely does not ever give you real quiet peace. The massive machine deeply takes absolutely everything valuable from you, and it aggressively gives you deeply bonded lethal brothers in highly permanent return. You hear the distant cadence of troops marching in the early morning fog. The sound echoes loudly across the wet concrete. Left, right, left. It absolutely never truly stops. It is a massive, eternal rhythm that completely swallows generations of innocent young men. You tighten the heavy laces on your dark boots. You grab your uniform from the metal locker. You prepare to feed the machine for another long day. You walk out alone into the freezing, totally bitter cold morning air. You are strictly the deeply obedient, highly lethal, specialized soldier they systematically built. You are exactly what you completely signed a massive stack of highly confusing legal government paperwork to eventually deeply become.